My friends, we live in an age of astonishing invention and incessant noise. Never before has humankind possessed so much information, nor felt so little certainty about what any of it means. We are surrounded by opinions, clamoring for allegiance, by headlines, each declaring itself the key to truth. Yet amid this storm of assertion, clarity, that rare and precious state of mind, becomes a form of courage. For clarity is not the absence of complexity, but the willingness to face it without panic. To think clearly is to see the world as it is, not as our desires or fears would have it be. This is the first and greatest freedom of the mind, to refuse to be a slave to confusion. Clarity does not come by inheritance, it must be cultivated. The mind, like the body, grows strong only by effort, and effort directed toward honest understanding is the noblest exercise. To think clearly, one must learn to pause, to examine the impulses that hurry us toward conclusion, to distinguish between what we know and what we merely wish were true. In that moment of pause, wisdom begins. Most people, when confronted with uncertainty, rush to comfort. But the thinker, the one who seeks truth, accepts uncertainty as the price of integrity. Clarity demands that we be patient with doubt and disciplined with belief. In every generation, there are forces that thrive upon confusion, those who would have you feel rather than think, shout rather than question. To resist them requires more than intellect. It requires character. The clear thinker must be humble enough to admit ignorance and brave enough to live with it. There is a quiet heroism in refusing to feign certainty where none exists. Such honesty may not bring applause, but it brings something far greater, peace of mind. For the mind at peace with its own limitations can see farther than the mind blinded by pride. Clarity, then, is not arrogance. It is serenity born of understanding. To achieve this serenity, one must learn the art of simplicity, not the simplicity that ignores complexity, but the simplicity that arises from having understood it. The truly clear thinker does not reduce the world to slogans. They untangle it until what remains is essence. When we understand a thing deeply, we no longer need to shout it. We can express it with quiet precision, with confidence that truth requires no adornment. Such simplicity liberates the spirit from the tyranny of confusion and the vanity of cleverness. It allows thought to serve its rightful purpose, to illuminate, not to dazzle. And so, if there is one idea that can change how you think forever, it is this: clarity is not something given, but something earned through honesty, humility, and courage. The secret to clarity lies not in possessing all the answers, but in the continual refinement of your questions. Every act of clear thought is an act of rebellion against the fog of the world and a declaration of your own freedom. Think clearly, and you will live freely. For the mind that sees truly cannot be deceived, and the heart that understands deeply cannot despair. My friends, I would have you remember that confusion is not a defect of your mind, but a condition of your time. You are born into a world that profits from your distraction, where every screen and slogan competes for the silence in which thought might otherwise bloom. To think clearly, then, is not merely an intellectual act. It is a moral one. It means reclaiming the right to your own attention. It means saying, I will not be carried by the current of noise. I will stand still until I can see the water itself. Clarity begins in that stillness, in the quiet recognition that one's thoughts need not belong to anyone else. The modern person, inundated by opinion, must rediscover the ancient discipline of contemplation. We are urged to react, to judge, to declare, but rarely to understand. Yet the mind that has not learned to understand cannot truly decide. Reaction is the enemy of reflection. It replaces insight with impulse. When we learn to pause, to look again at what first provoked us, the emotional fog begins to lift. Then, and only then, does clarity reveal itself as something not brittle but compassionate, a light that illuminates both the world's folly and its beauty. Clarity is not cold logic. It is warmth without sentimentality. It allows us to see that our fellow human beings are not villains or heroes, but creatures like ourselves, uncertain, yearning, imperfect. When we think clearly about others, we cease to demand perfection from them, and in so doing, we liberate both them and ourselves from needless hostility. This is why clarity is the foundation not only of wisdom, but of kindness. To see another person clearly is to recognize that their confusion mirrors our own, and that understanding, not victory, is the highest form of intelligence. But how does one keep this clarity amid the constant clamor of a world that rewards confusion? One must cultivate intellectual hygiene. Just as we wash the body to prevent disease, we must cleanse the mind of falsehood, prejudice, and fear. This is not done once, but daily, through reading that nourishes, through dialogue that challenges, through solitude that restores. The mind is like a lens. Left unattended, it clouds over. Polished with care, it reveals the stars. To think clearly is to polish that lens again and again, not for vanity, but for vision. And when that vision deepens, life itself becomes luminous. The smallest moments, a child's laughter, the movement of wind in the trees, a thought taking shape, acquire new meaning. Clarity transforms existence from a series of distractions into a work of art. The world does not grow simpler, you grow more awake within it. And that awakening, that deliberate act of seeing, is the quiet revolution of a free mind. There comes a moment, if one perseveres in the search for clarity, when the pursuit itself becomes an act of joy. At first, clear thinking may feel like struggle, a confrontation with one's own confusion, a dismantling of comforting illusions. But with patience, that struggle turns to delight, for there is deep pleasure in seeing things as they truly are. Reality, once feared, reveals its elegance. You begin to notice the coherence of thought, the rhythm of truth beneath the noise. And you realize that clarity, far from limiting your imagination, enlarges it, because imagination rooted in truth can soar without fear of collapse. We often imagine that clarity requires detachment from emotion, yet this is a mistake. The heart, when disciplined by understanding, becomes an instrument of insight rather than distortion. To think clearly is not to suppress feeling, but to align it with reason, to let compassion be guided by truth. The most destructive confusions in history have come not from passion itself, but from passion unexamined. A clear mind is not cold. It burns with a steady flame, lighting what is obscure without consuming it. In that light, one feels both tenderness and strength, humility and conviction, the true companions of wisdom. Consider how much of human misery arises not from malice, but from muddled thought. We mistake noise for significance, certainty for knowledge, opinion for principle. The tragedy is not that people are evil, but that they are untrained in the art of thinking. If we could teach each generation not what to think, but how to think, to analyze without cruelty, to doubt without despair, then perhaps the world would suffer less from anger and more from curiosity. For curiosity is the child of clarity. It replaces fear with wonder and hostility with exploration. To live with clarity, one must cultivate a quiet inner independence. The clear thinker listens to all, but bows to none. They seek wisdom, not in applause, but in coherence. The goal is not to win arguments, but to understand reality well enough that one's actions flow naturally from truth. It is this quiet alignment between knowledge and conduct that makes clarity a moral force. For when the mind is steady, conscience too becomes steady, and decisions, once clouded by confusion, take on a calm inevitability, as though reason and goodness had joined hands. And in that harmony, life assumes its proper proportion. The self, once restless, finds balance. The future, once frightening, becomes a field of possibility. To think clearly is to live deliberately, to act from understanding rather than reaction, to create meaning rather than chase it. It is the difference between drifting through existence and steering it with grace. And when you discover that grace, you find that clarity is not merely a way of thinking, it is a way of being. Yet clarity, like all virtues, must be defended anew each day. The forces that obscure the mind are patient, fear, vanity, haste, the craving to belong. They whisper that thinking is too hard, that conviction is easier, that complexity is a burden, and if we are not vigilant, we surrender quietly, exchanging our freedom for the comfort of noise. To remain clear, therefore, is to practice rebellion, a gentle, steadfast refusal to be deceived. The clear thinker does not seek victory in argument, but lucidity in thought. They do not crave to be right. They long to see rightly. It is tempting to imagine that clarity is a solitary pursuit, but it is not. Every clear thought adds light to the common world we share. The truth one person sees can kindle understanding in another. Ideas, once clarified, become bridges between minds rather than walls. And when enough people insist upon thinking honestly, even in small matters, the fog that shrouds public life begins to lift. In this sense, clarity is not only an individual triumph, but a social duty. Each honest thought contributes to the slow civilization of the human spirit. To live with clarity also means to live with gentleness toward error, both our own and others. For the path to understanding is strewn with mistakes, and to despise them is to despise learning itself. The wise do not fear being wrong. They fear ceasing to inquire. A clear thinker's humility is not weakness, but strength born of experience. They know that progress comes not from the infallible, but from those who dare to revise their thoughts in the light of new evidence. The courage to change one's mind is the truest proof of intellectual integrity. In the end, clarity offers something rarer than mere cleverness, serenity. When the mind no longer flails in contradiction, when thought and reality converge, there arises a quiet confidence that no applause can grant and no failure can take away. This is the peace of knowing that one has seen as truthfully as one can, and acted as justly as one knows. Such serenity is not an escape from the world, but an engagement with it at its deepest level, where understanding transforms confusion into compassion and reason into grace. So I leave you with this. Clarity is not a secret hidden in the clouds, but a discipline practiced in the heart. It is the light that dispels both arrogance and despair, the compass by which a soul may navigate an age of turmoil. Think clearly, live honestly, seek truth with humility, and you will find that no storm can obscure your way. For the mind that has learned to see is forever free.